Welcome, everyone, to the Directed IRA podcast with Mark Kohler and Matt Sorensen. We are delighted to be with you. We are recording today on St. Patrick's Day, and I'm just noticing I don't see any green, Mark.
I'm not seeing any on you.
I
Got a green tree in your back.
This isn't about me, it's about you.
Yeah, I'm sucking wind on that. But.
Yeah, me too. So, but you know, we got something else great for you today. Not green. Maybe how you can keep more of your green. We're talking about your dollars when you do a real estate development with your IRA.
Love it. Yeah, this is a huge topic. And for those that maybe have just bumped into our podcast by coincidence because you're a real estate developer, if you want to do some development and thought I can do this in my IRA, the answer is yes, yes, and yes, every day of the week and on Sunday. And we've had clients for years and years that have been finding unique real estate opportunities, from raw land to commercial development and everything in between, cell towers, freeway billboards. The term development is actually pretty broad. I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to take down a $50 million commercial building. And we see a lot of clients find a lot of success with this, save a lot in taxes, and build their IRA up faster.
Yeah. So. Yeah. In fact, it was a real estate developer that convinced me to be an expert on IRAs. That was the client I had who used his IRA to do a real estate deal. He was a real estate developer and he used his IRA to make $1 million profit in a Roth IRA, paid no tax. And I was like, that was awesome. And for the client, he was like, and this is the point of this, by the way, the client was like, all right, I know how to make money in real estate. I do real estate development. How can I use a Roth IRA to do that? Because if I do it in a Roth IRA, when I make money on this real estate deal, it goes back to the Roth IRA, no tax. Just like if I bought a stock or a mutual fund and profit on it in my Roth IRA. So it's that same concept we're talking about here, is using that Roth IRA account, investing it into a real estate deal, and then getting all those profits back in tax-free. And there's some things you got to know. There's some booby traps if you don't know where, but Mark and I, we're going to point them out during the podcast today.
I love it. And I'm going to, we normally have a little commentary or something fun to get the show rolling today, but we're diving right into it. I will say I'm eating lunch as we're doing this. I'm having maple bacon. There's a restaurant right across from our Phoenix office. Unbelievable. They literally have a dish called bacon. I mean, it's just so. So this is my lunch most times: rock stars and bacon.
That sounds good.
I'm walking heart attack, but waiting to happen. But you know, I'm living life to the fullest.
I know. I got an insurance policy on you, so
yeah,
live how you want to live, bro.
Yeah. Now, here's my first disclaimer too on this, or not disclaimer, but point of that everybody needs to take note of. This is not just a Roth IRA. This could be a Roth 401k.
Yeah, I mean, a traditional IRA, you could be tax deferred.
Yeah. So you got all sorts of options, and we'll maybe get into the how-to, but let's maybe just deal with concept, and maybe the potential variations of this.
Yeah.
So, and then we're going to talk about UBIT tax. I'm kind of giving everybody a little precursor of where we're going to head with this. UBIT, some of you that already do development say, hold it, I'm a developer, I'm going to pay some tax. At some point, maybe not. We'll talk about that. But let's just talk concept and ideas. So Matt, you've seen some fun ones. You want to do that? Kind of just give people, let's get our juices flowing with some ideas.
Let me give you an example. I think that's the easiest. Is I had some clients. This was two clients, partners. They both used Roth IRAs to go purchase land. Now, these were sophisticated investors. They've done real estate development outside their IRA. And they were like, we want to do this next deal in our Roth and not pay tax and have an awesome big Roth account. So that's what they did. They bought some land. Now, they went through a process of getting it paper developed. Okay. They didn't put in infrastructure. They didn't break ground. They had to do a couple of environmental things on the property to get some permitting done, but they basically got it subdivided, just all on paper. Worked with the city. They hired an engineer to do some stuff and present. And then they got the paper development. Well, then they waited about 5 years and then they sold it all to a national home builder in one big package. Now they bought this property for, I want to say around 600 grand and sold it for 6 to 7 million. Okay. So, and it was split between these two Roth IRAs. And so for them, they saw the opportunity on this property. They knew it would be valuable. They knew a couple of things that needed to happen. They had the deal negotiated. They came in and did it and pulled it off, not in their names, not in their personal companies, their S corps or LLCs. They did it in their Roth IRAs. And the Roth IRAs bought the land. The Roth IRAs put the money down. One of them didn't have money in a Roth IRA, had to convert traditional existing old 401k traditional dollars over to a Roth IRA and pay the tax. But he wanted to do that because he wanted all the profits to come out tax-free in the Roth IRA.
Okay, love it. Now, I want to put that example in a box, if I may, because a lot of you listening that maybe have some real estate experience, you have to think of that example that Matt gave as a very clean example without a lot of lot sales or
physical
transactions
improvement
involved. Yeah. There were minimal improvements. Is that what you said?
Right.
Minimal
Yeah. Minimal improvement. They had to do a couple environmental things, like remove this and something. They're just like, that was like environmental issues.
Now, why I want to put that in a box for everybody is because the more transactions involved, maybe there's lots, there's lots generated and lots sold, or there's spec homes bill or a commercial building bill, and it's condominiumized. And okay, once it gets to that, you can imagine it's not a very gray area of when it kind of falls into this more of a active development than more of a just kind of an improvement. Once it gets into that, and maybe Matt, you have a better word for it, but once it hits that, now there's a different tax involved because now you become a player. And so think of it that way, rather than just being, I'm going to buy this land, improve it a little and sit back and wait a year or 2 or 6 months, or I'm going to flip a property, which is fine. But once you start getting actively involved in some major development, now we have the UBIT tax, which is a kind of the IRS saying, we're going to level the playing field. You can't just do this tax-free and screw over every other developer out there. You're now at the point where you got to pay some tax, and we have an alternative there to save. But that, would you agree, Matt? And you can maybe explain the option to not pay UBIT or to minimize it. But,
so UBIT, by the way, is 37% tax. So this is a tax that your IRA pays if it falls into this booby trap, so to speak. I don't know if I love that word, but it's I went with it early on. I'm gonna stick to it.
No, we're stuck. I'm trying to think of, we can say it because Steven Spielberg did in Goonies.
What did he call it?
He called it booby trap.
He called it booby trap. Okay.
So we're gonna just stick with that.
I mean, who's going to argue with Spielberg? I mean, what do I know? Okay.
Okay. So UBIT 37%.
Yeah. Which, by the way, on Goonies, there's an amazing scene that I just saw on social media about our time. Do you remember that part in Goonies where they're like down there and they're finally like finding the treasure? The kids, and they're like, and the main character, I forget his name, but he's like up there, it's their time. It's our parents' time. They were having to move schools and all this. He's like, down here though, it's our time. It's our time. It's Goonie time. It was like this motivational thing. It was like, this is our time. Okay. Anyways.
Okay. You saw a good meme on that apparently.
Yeah, I saw a good little clip, inspirational clip. Check it out if you haven't seen Goonies. It's a good time. Okay. So you have this tax, UBIT, 37%. Your IRA pays it on profits it makes if it falls into this category of being a real estate development where it's active, like Mark's saying here. Now, you could say, well, what crosses the line? Because I thought income in my Roth IRA, if I make investment income on my Roth IRA, I don't pay any tax. Yeah, that's as long as it's investment income. So we need to be able to call the income you're making capital gain. We don't want to call it business income or development income. We want to call it, and legitimately, capital gain. So because capital gain income is exempt from this UBIT tax. So that's what we're trying to do. And that example I gave is they bought the big parcel. They did get it papered and subdivided. And there was some risk in that. If they immediately would have sold that, I would have been like, probably going to have UBIT. They waited. They had hardly any physical improvements. They held it almost 5 years. I think it was a little somewhere around 4. And then they sold it to one purchaser, a national home builder. Now, if they also went out, if you change the facts a little bit, sometimes it doesn't work. Like if they were building the homes on it and selling them one at a time, that's just clear real estate development, right? They would have had to pay 37% tax on the profits in which case they would have been like, well, why use a Roth IRA? I mean, might as well just do this personally. So, you do want to make sure your scenario fits in a box where you don't have UBIT, and it's going to determine length of hold time that you hold the property. Even if you do some paper development, you can still call it a capital gain. You also want to be careful on physical improvement. These are the factors that are going to get looked at. Mm-hmm. And then you want to look at how many sales do you have on the way out?
Volume.
What's that?
Volume.
Yeah. Is this multiple sales? Is this over a 10-year period? Is it all in one year
parcel?
That they all sell? Yeah. One parcel, 10, 5, 100. Like we're going to kind of be like, I want to look at every one of those factors in combination to then make an assessment. And these clients, I literally wrote a pretty long memo. And it became all the research I did to try and figure this out and flesh it out was really chapter 15 in my book, the UBIT tax on real estate development. So,
you mean this book right behind me here?
Yes, that one right there.
Yes, right
that
here.
Lovely book. Yeah, chapter 15.
IRA handbook. Yep. Okay, now everybody, here's an important thing that Matt said that I'm not saying I'm disagreeing with Matt on, but we hear this complaint quite a bit, and I have a counter argument. Matt said a moment ago, well, why do it in my IRA if I pay tax? Well, first of all, I have 2 comments. One, when we have clients that are up against this issue of UBIT, we use what's called a blocker corporation. So we'll set up an entity and as a subsidiary sometimes, or we'll just take the LLC that was created for this project, make a C Corp out of it. We can just make a C election. Now we pay a flat 21%. Not too bad. That's very reasonable. Pay the 21%. There's no individual flow through tax. You probably have a state tax issue, but depending on the state where you do it, but that's a federal 21%. That's done. Now, okay, so it's not as bad as 37.
Yeah, let me say on that point before you get to the next one is my largest client, which has a 9-figure Roth IRA, does that. And I remember we were going through UBIT one time on a deal in Texas. It was clearly going to be a development. Like there's no way it was not going to be a development. And we would always strategize on ways to not, but this one was definitely going to be, but he still wanted to do it. And we used the blocker. And his analysis was, all right, 21%. This was in Texas. He's like 21%. But if I was doing this personally, he was a California resident, by the way. So if I was doing this personally, what taxes am I going to pay? I'm already in the highest rate, high 30s. I'm going to have state income tax over 10%. I'm basically going to keep half the profits. You mean I only have to pay 21% if I do this and it hits my Roth IRA? That was like, that's a huge savings. I was like, that cut my tax bill in half.
Great comment. What's the soup du jour?
That's the soup of the day.
That sounds good. I'll have that. Now, here's the second point, which I think is even better. So some clients, and there's some groups out there, I won't say their name on this or we'll get a cease and desist nasty letter from them, but there's groups out there that say, you shouldn't do real estate in your IRA because you don't get the flow through depreciation and this and that. And they're just poo-pooing self-directing altogether. Now, here's the point I think a lot of people miss when they say, oh, you're going to pay tax in your IRA. Don't do it. It's just kind of a flippant, just a quick summary point. Here's the issue, people. Forget about the freaking tax for a minute. Look at your net return compared to what you'd get in Wall Street. So if you're going to take this Roth IRA and at best get an ETF that might pay 10% or more, if you get lucky on a repeated annual basis, maybe. And I know there's ETFs that can outperform 10% and some that are much less or negative. But the point is, compare what you're going to get in your Roth by not doing the development.
Yeah.
So if you say you do this development and you pay 20 or 30% in tax, holy hell, you're going to quadruple your IRA, but possibly with one development deal that's unique. And it's just, So look at the overall return net of tax and compare to what your Roth's going to get otherwise. That's the real, keep our eye on the ball, people.
Yeah. Yeah. And let me throw in a new issue though. We might as well. I mean, yeah, let's throw in another 4-letter word that can come into play here, but there's some solutions. So there's another tax that's a version of UBIT called UDFI, unrelated debt financed income. And so I've had a lot of, again, Roth IRA clients doing real estate deals, and they're having debt come into the deal. They're like, well, I'm buying this property, but the seller's financing it. I got seller financing, or I got some bank lending me the money. Well, this causes another version of tax. If you got debt in the deal, the IRS taxes the profits on the debt. And we have other podcasts, by the way, on this. I don't want to go too far into it, but I'm just giving a couple ideas because this comes up sometimes in the real estate development scenario where it's like, well, I got cash in my Roth IRA, but I don't have enough to buy it outright. But I don't want to bring in debt because this will cause this UDFI tax. And I'm trying to get this tax-free thing in my Roth IRA. What are my options? We've got a couple. One is, which I did with the client recently, I've done this a number of times, is bring in a partner rather than because see, the real estate developers out there, they've done a lot of deals. They got a lot of friends and other investors that like to fund their deals. They make money with them. And so they got their network. So what we did with this client is he had some other investor that was going to lend on the deal. I'm like, don't bring in debt. JV this person in as an equity partner. Give them an equity interest in this thing. Give them 5% of the profits when you sell, 3%, whatever, instead of paying them 8% interest or whatever the interest rate was going to be. So now that person has a profit sharing interest in the deal. There's no debt. So we get out from UDFI altogether. So that's a good option there, is bring in someone else who brings in cash, but make them an equity partner, whether they're in your LLC or you got a separate JV contract. I even had those JV contracts secured on the property. So they have they have kind of like record like an equitable interest or a notice of interest on title, just so that person that might be putting in a lot of cash feels secure in that cash going in.
I love it. Now I'm going to give a second alternative or second option to solving the debt problem is take all these Roth IRAs, folks, that you might be using in this scenario, and let's get it into a Roth 401k.
Yeah.
So,
or just do a Roth 401k, right? Yeah, because the Roth IRA is going to stay Roth IRAs, but now, why do you want the Roth 401k though?
Yeah. So if you can do this in a Roth 401k scenario, there's no UDFI. You can have all the debt you want, and under ERISA, 401k plans are exempt from debt financed income. Now, it is true, if you have a Roth IRA, I can't roll that into a 401k, and I can't take a Roth portion in a 401k. And well, I can roll out a Roth out of a 401k into a Roth, but I can't take a Roth and roll it into my 401k. So I've got to get this.
Roth IRA can't go into Roth 401k, right?
Yeah. But some of you might say, well, I have some 401k money or that I'm going to convert to Roth before I do the deal, or I have a traditional IRA that I can roll into a 401k and then do the Roth conversion.
Yeah.
And we have so many people that are frustrated, like, I just did a Roth conversion, now I want it in a 401k. You should have rolled it into the 401k before you did the Roth conversion.
Yeah.
So this is why a strategy session early on, if you're, so here's a big takeaway, number one, if you haven't already found a little golden nugget here, is if you're thinking about doing a real estate development with a retirement account, get a consult, just right up front. Talk to one of our tax lawyers and say, here's all the variables, here's all this, here's my partners, here's my traditional, here's my Roth, and and listen to this podcast a second or third time before you go into that consult, and have your questions down and then tailor it to your situation. So so many options.
Yeah. And the other, I want to make a couple other points too. I just want to keep layering, just throwing in, a little bit, just more nuggets, I guess. Is if you're new to self-directing too, remember, you can't do the work. So we have a lot of developer clients that have a construction company or, and it's like, okay, that company's not involved. They're like, well, I'm going to go show up at the city and do the planning and zoning hearing. I don't love that either. Okay. You've got to be kind of administering the investment we don't want you on the ground with a shovel, or with your construction company, or even at the Planning and Zoning Commission. The IRA should pay for someone else to do that work. So have the Roth pay someone else to do that. You've got to take a step back from doing the actual physical work or having your personal companies involved. That causes what's called a prohibited transaction. If that's new, go back. We got prior podcast episodes entirely explaining those rules.
Yeah. And see, there's again someone that'll just say an offhanded comment like, well, I can't do development in my Roth because I'm a developer. No, you can still do a development. You just can't be the one doing the manual labor of the development. And so once we get developers, I've got a group out of Utah that just does phenomenal development work. They caught on to this and they say, okay, so we have this LLC over here where our Roth IRAs are partners, and we're going to dedicate that to development where we know we're going to hire a third-party contractor, or we're going to hire our engineer to go to the city meetings. And they say, and that's okay, because when the right deal comes along where they really don't need to provide all that extra work, they can sub it out. They're like, perfect, cherry pick it. So you developers are listening, have that other entity over there in the wings, ready to go when a project fits the characteristics that make it work.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the thing, is not every deal is going to work in this scenario. There might be components like Mark's saying where, you've got to do more work, or it's typically your company needs to get more involved. And that's just how that deal has to work to make money. Or it's going to require a ton of parcels and a lot of sales, or it's something you're going to turn over in 6 to 9 months, or even a year and a half. And it's like, these things could cause UBIT or prohibited transactions. So it doesn't fit in the right box here where we like this real estate development deal. So, but there's out there, if you're doing enough of these, you're going to find the ones that fit nicely in this. You're like, that's the one I'm going to do with my Roth IRA. Kind of one other tip to add in here is using an LLC. So you can buy real estate directly in your IRA, but most developers and most real estate investors are going to have their IRA own an LLC, or multiple Roth IRAs or Roth 401ks, whatever the combo may be, owning an LLC. That LLC is out doing the investment in the deal. And you can be the manager of the LLC. You can't make a salary or anything like that. But you can have a bank account for it, cut the checks, buy it in the LLC's name. The Roth IRA or Roth 401ks or combination of those could be owning in that.
Yeah. I thought that almost goes without saying, people, if you're going to do real estate, it just blow. If you want to have your IRA do direct deals, we're talking promissory notes or some simple things. But once you start going down this development route,
private fund,
you've got to go LLC. Now, by the way, did you know there's a little irony here? This is how we tie our show together, and just in amazing ways.
Do tell.
Okay, what was the problem in Goonies? Why they needed to find the treasure? Do you remember?
Well, weren't they they're having to move or something, right?
Because of a real estate developer was taking their house. Remember that?
Right. That's right. That was damn real estate developers.
That's because they come out of the cave and they're like, we found all these jewels, and the real estate developers right there forcing Dad to sign it. And they go, Dad, you don't have to sign. Oh boy, small world.
Yeah, you're bringing it back. You're bringing it back,
baby. Bringing it back. Okay, now here's another unique situation.
That was the payoff.
That was the payoff. There's the payoff. That's what they call it in Hollywood. If you're on the inside.
You were like, why were they talking about Goonies earlier? That makes no sense. Well, you hung through it and you got the payoff right there.
We got the payoff. If you don't know what a payoff is, you watch Arrested Development, and after 3 episodes, you understand what a payoff is. Oh my gosh. Richie Cunningham, no otherwise known as Ron Howard, knows how to work a payoff into a show. Such a good show. All right. So
speaking of real estate developers, Bluth Homes. Again.
Oh man, bring it in, Arrested Development. The Bluth Company in Orange County. All right. AKA Irvine Company. All right. Anyway. Okay. So here's another unique consideration. This was from a call I had earlier today. And when you do real estate development, we kind of have to think of collateral effect or collateral damage, but it's usually collateral effect. Now, what I mean by this is you developers know this. When you buy a parcel and develop it, what does it do to all the surrounding property? A lot of times it's going to increase the value of connected property, even could be a mile away, just so this is how developers are thinking. They're always thinking 5-10 years down the road, and they're picking up parcels that might have a residual effect of a development they're doing a mile away. Very, very smart. So I was on this call today and a client was saying, hey, we're buying 2 parcels and to get to the first parcel, which we really want, you got to go through a second parcel. So you got to go through parcel number 2 to get to parcel number 1. Well, we're going to develop parcel number 1. And by doing that, it's going to create access. We've got to go through parcel 2 to do it, to get access to parcel 1. And once we do all those improvements, parcel 2 is going to be worth a lot more. But really all the work is on parcel 1. They go, and during our conversation and strategy, they go, can we have our IRA own parcel 2? I was like, what's the soup today? Anyway, so I was like, that's cool. Okay. So I said, well, maybe was the answer, because if we plan on paying for all the improvements on parcel 1 personally in that development, and just let the IRA buy this cheap piece of land in the front, and then just wait around for parcel 1 to be finished and parcel 2 gets this huge windfall, the IRS is going to go, So what I talked about with them was, okay, what are the improvements going to be that are going to benefit both parcels? Well, there was water, there was a road, there were some utilities, and this and that. I said, okay, well, what you do is I bring up one of my favorite words, bifurcate, is what we're going to do is divide those improvement expense proportionally between the 2 projects. And that's okay. So when you go hire the well driller and the road builder and the blah, 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 whatever sub, you're going to say, okay, well, a portion of this bill is going to be paid by the IRA LLC and a portion of the bill will be paid by our personal LLC. So if possible, and we still had a lot to work through, but the point is when you're doing developments that might be part IRA and part personal, even though they're 2 separate parcels, 2 separate LLCs, if there's an expense that needs to be pro rata, you got to talk about it. And it may not, the deal may not be able to be done. We got to look at prohibited transactions, but you may hire a third party to say, do this part, we're going to pay for it with this LLC, do that part, we're going to pay for it. But you got to be really religious about splitting up expenses. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's pretty aggressive. I think it's possible, but I think anybody who's going to go down that path needs to take a step back and be like, okay, so this is definitely aggressive. The IRS can make a challenge here and be like, that wasn't a fair allocation, and they can win a prohibited transaction. So if you don't love that, then don't do that. But if you're like, nah, but I got to do this deal, it's the right deal. Okay. All right. Well, proceed with caution, be very careful and meticulous. You have to treat it almost as if it's like your IRA was doing a deal and I was on the other parcel personally.
I said that on my call. I said, well, how much would you make me pay if I own parcel 2? Well, we'd make you pay this. That's what the IRA pays. Oh, yeah. You can't give it special care and treatment.
Yeah. And see, what happens sometimes is when clients go down that path, they're like, yeah, then I don't want to do it because I wanted all that benefit going to my Roth at the end of the day. And we're like, we know. And so does the IRS. So they're like, are you sure you want to do this? Okay.
Oh, geez.
And if you do, if you're like, no, I don't want to do it. Okay, well, can my Roth IRA jump in then? Because I want that deal. Hell no. Exactly. So be careful. It is possible. I have had some clients do kind of deals and developments where there are neighboring properties, but I just that you do leave yourself exposed a little bit to the IRS where they can make an argument that your allocation wasn't fair. So just be careful.
Now, another consideration, and this may be my last one, Matt, and you might have who knows where we go, but one more is another escape hatch, if you will, or kind of get out of jail free card. I want to say it that way. Get out of jail free card. Is you have to look at the percentage of ownership. And this is where Matt has written articles, 50 Shades of Gray when it comes to IRAs, is you may want your construction company involved to some degree, or one of your children to work on the project, or one of your family members might be getting a salary to be involved in the development or something like that, or a subcontractor. If you own 100% of this development with IRA funds, your IRA funds, the prohibited parties involved, it's no way, no deal. And please go back and listen to some of our initial podcasts in our playlist where we talk about prohibited transactions and prohibited parties, and you'll find out real quick what those rules are. But just to give you a little sneak peek here is, let's say you own 30% of the development with your IRA, and the other 70%, maybe 2 or 3 other parties, unrelated to you, non-family, not partners in a same company of yours. There's just literally 3 quote unquote partners. We don't want to use the I word, investors, but you have 3 partners out there that own more than 50%, maybe 60 to 70 to 80% of the project, and you're only 20 with your IRA. Just measly little you with your IRA, 20 to 25%. Well, that opens doors. You might be able to work on the project. You might have family members that can work on it and get paid fair market value for their services, and we're okay. Yeah. So, Matt, what do you? I mean, that you're the master of the gray shades of gray there.
Yeah. I mean, I did read a few books about, the 50 Shades of Gray. So
you had to do some research.
I'm certified. You could say. Certified in what? Let's not discuss that. But as to prohibited transactions, I think that's a good example at 20%. If your Roth's in the deal, your IRA, 401k is in the deal at 20%, and it's other investors and people that own the majority of it, and you're on the other end with the construction company or doing the work, or, I'm not as concerned about that. There's not as much risk. It's not a prohibited transaction, as long as you're not doing some weird arrangement, right? But if you're like, no, I was just one of 5 investors in this thing. I got my 20%. My IRA put in some of the cash to get it. It's fair share. And I happen to be on the other end making some money doing the work with my construction company. Cool. We've seen that. We see that with just even single family home flips. Same thing, and I always teach the example of, 3 investors get together. Let's say it's me, Mark, and you listening here, the 3 of us, we, go set up an LLC. We each own a third and put in 1/3 of the money, buy a property, rehab it. And now we want to sell it. And let's say that my IRA wants to buy it. I'm like, guys, I want to, you guys are flipping this. We're all kind of in on this, and I'm personally in here, but I want to buy it with my IRA and hold it as a rental long-term. Could I do that? Yes, because when the IRS looks at that, they're like, well, Matt's only got a third. Mark and this other person here, they're not prohibited. So that'd be okay. Your IRA could buy it because there's a 50% rule and a control rule here. So, but again, this can get in a gray area if you're trying to do something weird, or you're at 49%, or even 40, or kind of anything above a third. There's some cases where people have lost. Get an opinion, talk to a lawyer that's familiar with these rules. We have them in our firm. They've done thousands of consults on clients just like you, doing types of deals like this.
Oh, okay. I have one last one, then we can wrap it up.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Yep.
A development always doesn't mean immediate exit or an exit strategy. A development could be for the purpose of rental.
Yeah.
And so we understand that. So we don't want to say every development has a flip characteristic. So you might be buying raw land to put on cell towers, wind energy, billboards. You might be buying a property.
Apartment building. Who cares?
Building it out. Yeah. Well, I was getting there.
Okay. You're all about the weird stuff.
I was going to work my way up to that, but you could be storage units. It could be steel buildings, industrial buildings. It could be warehousing. Then we get into the apartments and commercial buildings. So development could be a $10,000 deal. You're buying some raw land and letting Verizon sign a contract for a cell tower. So don't think you have to have a lot of zeros to fall into the development conversation involved. So, and they could be very creative. So what I'm getting at here, though, is if the exit strategy is really turning it into a rental, then the UBIT tax is going to be a lot further away from a conversation, because you're not flipping it. You're not creating paper lots and building spec homes and putting in roads and curb and gutter. You're going to buy a place, you're going to build it, and you're going to put it up for rent. It's still a development, but the end game is rental, and you're not going to have a UBIT situation there. Would you agree?
Yeah. And some of the operative language here in the tax code would be like building or developing for immediate sale with an intent to immediately sell. That's some of the words you'll see in the tax code on this. So it's like, if I develop something or build something and hold it and it's rented and held for investment purposes, and then I sell it a few years later, well, okay, that could be capital gain. But if you develop it, build it, and it goes right on the market for sale, well, that's a development. You're going to be into this. It's not really a capital
Immediate
gain.
sale.
Yeah, that was an immediate sell, and you can't argue, well, that wasn't my intent. Well, you built it and immediately sold it. How's it not? But if you're like, oh, I rented it for a few years, I ended up changing my mind. The market changed, and I'd rather have sold the property. Cool, you get capital gain. The IRS can't prove that was your intent to immediately sell if you have a few years of a hold where it was, rental and put into clearly investment purposes.
I think we could almost come up with 3 categories here: development for immediate sale, development for rental, development for hold. And they could play out in different ways.
Yeah.
And so the word development can kind of be like the metaverse, metaverse means a lot of things. Or, crypto, a lot of things involved in the word crypto. And I think development is the same way. We have to be careful saying, well, you don't want to do development in an IRA or a Roth or this. No. What kind of development are you doing? And what are the terms, and what is the timeline, and who's involved? And so there's a lot of, this is where, I'll be blunt, tax lawyers make their money. You come with an idea, we figure out how to do it tax-free, you work within those parameters, win, 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 IRS lose.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. Now, let me say, I think one of the most significant lessons I had of clients doing real estate development with their IRAs that I learned, that I just want to share today, and I think I've said this before on the podcast, is what I've really learned from these types of clients who do this, which I love. I've loved working through these scenarios.
This is your disclaimer before you piss someone off. Go ahead.
No, I was just like, no, I was building. I was disclaimer. I learned that like great investments aren't sold; they're found and made. What these types of people who have had really big returns, and I've helped in some of these examples about real estate development and IRA, they made these deals. They found them. They came up with the concept when seeing the property and what was happening. It wasn't just like sold to them and put on the MLS. These deals were made, and they were able to create significant returns. And when you're making a deal, you can kind of move stuff around and figure out, okay, how could I do this for the Roth? Is this going to work? And maybe it's one that fits in the box and goes for the Roth. And if it doesn't, cool, it's still an amazing deal. Do it how you've always done it in your personal name or your company. But I just thought that's an important lesson. I just want to share. So I really believe that, like, great investments are found and made. They're not sold.
Yeah. Oh, you know what you need to say? I'm going to correct you.
Made and found.
They're found and made, not purchased.
Ooh, not purchased. Okay. That's a better, yeah. Well,
because you were saying sold, like, well, I'm not, at some point I'm going to sell, but yeah, I love that quote. Good developments, great developments, investments are found and created
or made. Yeah.
Made, not purchased. I like that. I'll have some of that. Okay. Well, you brought us in. I'm going to take us out. Everybody, if this topic was interesting to you, behind me on my shelf, if you're watching on YouTube, for those listening on the podcast, I am holding up the one and only Self-Directed IRA Handbook, second edition. Seriously, Matt's got a whole chapter 15. I'm going to verify that. If he really did know that it was chapter 15, I'm going to be impressed. So chapter 15, he says, is developments.
It's UBIT.
Oh, it's UBIT. Gotcha.
But it's a long chapter, and I got the cases and all the stuff in there. So for any of you nerds, you CPAs and attorneys that want to cross-reference this stuff. Mark and I, by the way, are attorneys. If you didn't know, Mark's also a CPA.
I like this, and I've even got a yellow Post-it in on this chapter. Yeah. So this is great book. Everybody, please get it. This is literally your handbook if you're going to do self-directing. And so thanks everybody for listening today. Please share this podcast if you found it helpful. Give it a 5-star if you wouldn't mind. Get
Yeah.
out and make your dreams come true.
Yeah. And if you need an IRA, we can help you at Directed IRA, directedira.com. If you need to plan this structure and how to do it, and is UBIT going to apply or not, or how can I rework the deal? Give our lawyers at KQS Lawyers a call and we can help you out there as well.
It's all down in the description. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week.